Hello guys, my name is Kishan and today we are going to talk about sequences in Oracle SQL. So what are sequences, where are they used, how to use them, we'll address all these questions in this tutorial. So basically sequence are Oracle objects. These objects generate unique numbers, These objects are used for primary key, unique key, or just filling in columns or just generating unique numbers. A sequences can be an ascending sequence or a descending sequence. That is like an ascending sequence, I would say, like it starts from a smaller number such as 1 and it increments. It goes to 2, 3, 4 like that. Or a descending sequence would be something like which starts from a bigger number, say such as 100, and then comes down like 100, 99, 98, 97, such. So when you are working with sequence, you will increment the sequence. Now once incremented, the value is generated. Now you cannot go back to the older value. That is the beauty of sequence. You will have unique values each and every time you execute or you increment a sequence. So I've always heard this question: how can I reset my sequence? How can I get the lost value back? Those things cannot be addressed. Yeah, you can alter the sequence and then get it back to a previous value and then use it. That way it can be, but otherwise a sequence will always generate unique numbers, and a number once generated will not be repeated. Also, the sequence are independent of tables, so you can create one sequence, use them in multiple tables, or you can create a sequence and use them across your code in PLSQL, across your functions, procedures, anywhere. In 12c, there is a new feature of identity columns where you bound a sequence to a column, but that is not what we are discussing over here. Over here we are just discussing sequences in Oracle, normal sequences. So in front of you is the basic syntax of a sequence. So what you see over there, everything in red is optional. So yes, you can just create a sequence as simple as create sequence, sequence name, and done. You have created sequence with all the default values, and also the best part of the sequence is there's no need to remember this order. These are the various clauses like increment by, start with, max value, no max value. All of these are the parameters that you use in sequence while creating a sequence. All of them are optional, and the order is not important. You can mention whatever, wherever, and it will work fine. Yeah. So let me get into the syntax of creating a sequence. Over here I have create sequence, schema name, which is optional, dot sequence name. Then we have increment by some value, start with some value. Okay, so let me consider them both related something each other. I'll explain it how. Then we have max value and no max value. No max value is the default one. Then we have min value and no min value. No min value is the default one. Then we have cycle and no cycle. No cycle is the default one. Cache, no cache, order and no order. Now we'll get into each of this. Now what is start with? When we say start with, we are specifying Oracle that I want this particular sequence to be started with this particular value, such as start my sequence with 100, start with 100, or start my sequence with 1, start with 1. So start with is the starting point of the sequence, from where the sequence starts. Okay. Now comes increment by, the next clause. What increment by specifies is the interval between the two generated values. Say suppose I want the increment between my two values of 10. So I can start with 1, then I have an increment by 10. So it will leave 10 values and then get the next value. So it is 1 plus 10, that is 11. Okay. So that is increment by, the intervals between the values of the sequence. Now this increment by can either be a positive number if you want an ascending sequence, can be a negative number if you want a decreasing sequence, but it can never be 0. Okay, so that's the thing to remember. So say suppose I create a sequence demo, like create sequence demo, start with 1 and increment by 10. What I'll get something like is 1, then the next increment is plus 10, so 1 plus 10, 11, and then is plus 10, so 21, 31, and so on. I'll show you this all in a practical demonstration. This is just to understand these two, so that by the time we can look at all the clauses and then we'll get into the practicals. Okay, then next we have Say suppose you want a decreasing sequence. So as I said, create sequence name start with say 100. I want to increment by minus 10. So my sequence starts with minus 10 and then decreases every time by 10 values. So it goes like 100, 90, 80 and so on. Now next comes the other two parameters of max value and no max value. Over here, no max value is the default one. If you don't specify any maximum value, no max value clause will be taken, and no max value is like 10 raised to 27. The digit that we get maximum would be like 10 raised to 27 for an ascending sequence, and for a descending sequence it would be minus 1, right? Minus 1 is the maximum value in the negative number series. Now the max value. Now max value is the maximum value a sequence can generate. Now this max value should always be greater than or equal to the start with value, and it should always be greater than the minimum value. It is like I am saying, start my sequence with 1, okay, increment it by 1 every time, but the max value is 5. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and at 5 it is the max, okay. So that is what max value states, the maximum value a sequence can have. Now similarly, minimum value. That minimum value is the minimum value that a sequence can generate. It will always be either less than or equal to the start with value, and it should always be less than the maximum value. But these are all non-mandatory parameters. You might not need them anytime, okay. So by default, Oracle takes something like no minimum value. Now this no minimum value is 1 for an ascending sequence, right? If we are creating a positive sequence, what we can have as minimum, that is 1. And if it is a negative, the maximum that Oracle allows is 10 raised to minus 26. Okay. Now then comes the cycle and no cycle. These two are quite interesting and very much useful. Now as I said, I just gave an example with a max value saying that I can create a sequence starting with 1, increment by 1, and the max value is 5. So when it reaches 5, Oracle throws an error saying, no, when it reaches 5 it is all okay, but when you increment from 5, Oracle throws an error saying that the max value allowed was 5, was where you are going, this is not allowed. So what if you want to allow, what if you want to continue, you can use cycle. The cycle states that whenever the sequence comes to its maximum value, no problem, start it again from the minimum. That is what sequence is. Yeah. So say suppose my sequence is something like it starts with 1, increments by 1. I have a max value of 5. Okay. And then I can just specify something called a cycle. When I specify cycle here, it's like 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. If it is a cycle, it will again start from the minimum value. That is by default 1. Okay. If it is no cycle specified, which is by default, after reaching 5, if you then again increment it, you get an error. So this is the concept behind cycle and no cycle. When there is a cycle, even after reaching the maximum value, you can again start the sequence from the minimum value. If it is no cycle, max value is the end. The same vice versa goes for decreasing sequences also. Okay. By default, just remember that it is no cycle, and that is advisable, because if you are using, say suppose a sequence in primary key, you don't want it to again start from the beginning if it ever reaches the max value, right? Also a primary key constraint would fail it, so that's another part. And now comes the catch and no catch. Now one thing to understand which catch is, why catch is required, why does Oracle give this option of catch? Catching helps, it pre-allocates some values in the database. Like you are, every time when you go and execute a sequence, it takes some time, right? You execute that statement, sequence value.maxval, it goes to the compiler, it increments, returns you the value. So there is a little bit of work going to be done. Oracle has every time to increment it, it has to check where the various parameters, whether it is not going to the max value, whether it is, whether it is a cycle or no cycle, and all those things. So what Oracle does, Oracle pre-allocates some value in the cache memory itself. So when you give an option of catch, when you say catch 20 or catch 30, Oracle will catch the coming 30 values and put it into the database. So then whenever you keep on calling the sequence, the value that you are calling will come from the memory. There's no need for every time for Oracle engine to go and hit the sequence, increment it, check all the parameters and return you the value. So it is faster. So only for that reason catch is used. If you specifically say no catch, Oracle won't catch any values. Okay. If you specifically give catch, you need to specify how many values do you want to catch it. The minimum allowed is 2. You cannot catch 1. You can catch 2, 20 like that. Okay. And if you don't specify anything, which I do normally, I don't specify catch or no catch. What Oracle does, it will by default catch 20 sequence numbers. That is by default. Okay. So this is working with catch and no catch. It helps in faster retrieval of the values of the sequence. Okay. And by default what Oracle does is 20 values are cached. Now comes the order and no order. Now it is quite confusing. People always get confused with these two parameters. There's nothing much into both of them. They would come into consideration when you are using a sequence number as a timestamp, or you are using a rack environment where there are chances that your sequence, when you are incrementing, you might not get in an order. But if you are normally using your OLTP database, always you will get your sequence in an order. So there's no need to specify any of these in your normal day-to-day work. Yes, if you are using rack application and you want your sequence number to get every time generated in an order, just specify order there. In the same way, if you specify no order, you are saying that you don't want and guarantee that the sequence number comes in an order every time. Okay, so that is default, by the way, for all. Now working with sequence, how would you increment a sequence, or how would you get the value of your current sequence? So when you are working with sequence, what you will do is you will write something like sequence name dot current value, that is currval. It returns the current value of the sequence. Similarly, if you mention something like sequence name dot next val, it returns the next value of the sequence. Okay, it will increment the sequence. So once a value sequence number is incremented, that value you will get, then no way again you will get the same value. Okay, whether you commit it, whether you roll back it, it is not a question. Once a sequence is incremented, a value is generated, that value can again never be generated from that sequence unless you alter the definition of the sequence and get it back. Okay. And one more thing that we need to remember over here is, in a session, particularly in a session, first of all, when you are using a sequence, you need to get the next value. You need to increment the sequence. Once that you have incremented the sequence, then you can get the current value of the sequence. You might have incremented the sequence in some other session, okay, but that won't work. In every fresh session, you need to first get the next value of the session. So once you get the next value, Oracle has started using that sequence in that particular session, and then you can use the current value. Okay, that's currval. If you directly use current value, you will get an error. Oracle will say like the sequence is not incremented or not used in this session, something like that. I'll just show you that with practical demonstration. What I'll do is I'll just create a sequence called as demo sequence. Okay, I'm creating a sequence over here called as demo sequence. So how to create it? We can write create sequence demo sequence. I want this sequence to start with 100. Okay, so my clause will be like start with 100. I want an increment value every time of 1. I'm creating an ascending sequence. So I'll write increment by 1. So this is done. I execute it. I just hit Control and Enter. I executed it. The sequence is created. Now I want to use this. How can I use it? Simply, it is just simple as like select, write the sequence name, that is demo_sequence. Okay, mention something like next val, that is get me the next value from dual table. Okay, now if I don't use this next val over here and I directly use current val, as I said, it will raise an error. It says that this sequence is not yet defined in this session. Oracle is saying you are asking me to get the current value, but what current value shall I give you? You have not incremented that sequence in this session, so I cannot give you a current value. So first you need to do something like maxval. You need to use that sequence, you need to increment that sequence. That is all what I mean. When you do it, you get, okay, the sequence is started. It says start with 100. So next time again, when I do this select demo sequence dot next value that I get is 101. What happened is my sequence from 100 got incremented to 101. Now again when I execute it, it's 102. Okay. Again when I execute it, it's 103. Then 104. So what is happening is my sequence started with 100, and every time I execute the sequence, it is getting incremented by 1. So this is where how you can generate unique numbers, the primary key values for your tables. Okay. So this is it. This is how you can create a simple sequence. Now what I'll show is, I'll show a sequence with a max value. Okay. I'll just drop this sequence. Now to drop a sequence, what you are going to do? Just write simply drop sequence name. My sequence name is demo sequence. So drop sequence demo sequence. Execute it. Your sequence is dropped. Now I'll just recreate this sequence with a max value. So I let it be like, say, create sequence name. I'm starting with 100. I'm incrementing by 1. And what I'll do is I'll give a max value. I'll give a max value of 105. Okay. So what I'm saying is I want a sequence that starts with 100, incremented by 1 every time, but it should not go more than 105. If it goes more than 105, let's see what happens. Okay, so I've created it. Now I am executing it for the first time. I get 100. I get the start with value on the very first execution. Execute second time. It gets incremented by 1. Third time, fourth time, fifth time, sixth time. And now when I execute it, that is, it is at this max value. See the current value of the sequence. If I want the current value, what I can do is select demo underscore sequence, that is name dot curval. This is a pseudo columns that Oracle has given us to use. So this current value is 105. Okay, that is the max value. Now if I try and increment it, what happens is Oracle gives an error saying the sequence exceeds max value and it cannot be initiated. Okay, you are at your max value, you cannot use this more. So this is how you can work with max value. Okay, so we have checked start with, increment by, max value. Now minimum value for a normal ascending sequence will be 1. You can check that in the data dictionary. You can see like select star from user underscore sequences where sequence name is this one. So this is what I'm doing. I'm just querying the data dictionary to check what is the minimum value and all. See, you can see the minimum value is 1, the maximum value is 105. Okay, and all the details that we have set during our execution is over here. See, as I told that by default it is no cycle, so you can see the cycle flag is n. Then you have seen the order flag is n, that is by default order by is no. By default catch size, if you don't mention any, it is 20. Okay, and Oracle catches the upcoming 20 numbers in the database. So, okay, so the max value over here is 105, so it will not go more than that. See, one thing to understand is never to get confused with last number as the current value for sequence. Last number is the catched number. Like if you might have given catch 200, okay, and Oracle will catch 200 values when the first time the sequence is incremented. So that is not our current value. So if you want to find current value, it is a separate process, but never confuse last number with your current value. Now as I have seen here, when we are doing a next well, it is getting an error. It is saying the next well exceeds the maximum value. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just drop this sequence and create this sequence as a cycle. Okay, so our concept of cycle can be understood. What we say is in cycle that if a max value is reached, start from the min value again. Okay, so this is 100, then 101, 102, 103, 104, 105. Now when there was no cycle over there, which is by default, and I incremented from 105, it gave me an error saying you cannot exceed more than this. But now when I do it with cycle, it starts with the minimum value. It starts with 1 again. Okay, so this is the beauty of cycle. When you mention cycle, When the max value is reached, again it will go and start from the minimum value. See, always remember, this is a tricky interview question where candidates get confused and says it starts with 100 because the start with value over here is 100. No, it starts with the minimum value. Always keep in mind that when a cycle happens, then the next coming value after the max value is the minimum value, not the start with value. Okay, that is one thing that I want you guys to just keep in mind. So we have seen this. Now I'll just show a very simple way to create a sequence that starts with 1 and increment by 1. You will be surprised to see this statement. See, it is create sequence. Let me say demo underscore sequence underscore 1. Okay. So this is it. This is what I'm mentioning. Nothing else. Actually, I've already a sequence with this name. So what I'll do is demo underscore sequence underscore Kishan. I'll give this name. And as you can see, the sequence is created. I've just written three words: create sequence and sequence name, and I have the sequence. So what is the sequence created? It is created with all the default parameters. Okay. It will start with 1, it will increment by 1, it will catch 20 characters, it will be a no cycle, it will be a no flag, it will have max value of 9s, I think it's 27 or 28 digits. It is 28 digits that Oracle allows as a max value. Okay, so this is it. I just create a sequence with create sequence name. This is it. Very simple way to create a sequence. Now I can do something like select demo underscore sequence underscore Kishan dot next value from div, and when I execute this, I get 1, I get 2, I get 3. So you have created a sequence which starts with 1, with increments by 1, and all the default parameters. So if you are looking for such something so simple, this is it. You can go for this one. Okay. Now when you are using a sequence in a PLSQL block, you can directly assign this sequence in your insert statements. So say suppose I have a table called as, I'll just create a table called as demo countries. Okay, I have two values, that is country ID, a number, and country name. Country name will have a data type of varchar2 30. As you can see, the table is created. Now when I want to insert into this table using any of my sequence, I can mention like insert into table name. Okay, values. Now the first one is I want to use this sequence demo underscore sequence underscore Kishan dot next value. So I can just copy this, I can paste it here as it is, put some country name, say country name as India, execute it. A row is inserted. Let me check how it is. Select star from demo underscore country. As you can see, I have a row with country ID 6 and country name India. Okay, why 6? Because I was incrementing that sequence. Now see, you might roll back this statement. See, it got inserted with 6 Kishan. Let me insert it again. Let me select it. See, you can see 7 and India. Why? Because as I mentioned, whether you commit or roll back, it doesn't matter. A sequence value once generated is generated. Okay, you cannot get that number back. Now 6 is unused. Okay, it is gone. I can again execute this statement. What I get is 8 India. Let me roll back it again. Let me see, nothing is there. Okay, execute it again. It will be 9 India. So this is the way it works. Okay, so these are particularly, I mentioned everything about sequences over here that you might be using in your day-to-day work. And I hope this video, guys, was informative and you guys enjoyed this video. Please do let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please do communicate. Please do let me know what I need to change in my presentation so that it can be more helpful to you guys. I hope this was informative and you guys enjoyed it. Please do like, share and subscribe to my channel. This is Kishan signing off. Thank you.